In the year 3085, humanity had reached the stars. After centuries of struggle, humans had joined the Great Starborn Alliance, a group of alien civilizations that worked together to keep peace in the galaxy. Among these worlds was the planet Vera, home to the Varians, tall, graceful beings with silver eyes and calm voices. They were known for discipline, intelligence, and beauty. They believed in control of emotion and lived by laws that valued logic over passion. One of the humans sent to Vera was Darren, a soldier of the Terran Defense Force. He was not from a famous family or special background. He was a simple man who had joined the army to protect others. He had seen many battles and learned that courage was not about glory, but about standing firm when everyone else was afraid. Darren had been chosen to serve as part of the Alliance's Joint Defense Task Force. The mission was to help the Varians guard their border colonies against a rising enemy called the Krell Dominion. The Krell were known for attacking weaker planets, enslaving species, and taking resources. The Alliance had promised to protect all its members, and the humans had stepped forward to help. When Darren first arrived on Vera, he was struck by its beauty. The air shimmered with pale light from the twin suns. The forest had silver leaves that reflected sunlight like glass. The Varian cities looked like floating towers, built from smooth crystal and powered by quiet energy fields. Everything seemed peaceful, but the soldiers knew danger was near. Darren met Commander Lyra, the Varian officer assigned to lead the Joint Defense Unit. She was tall with silver skin and calm gray eyes. Her voice was even and measured. To the humans, she looked almost like a work of art brought to life. When she spoke to her soldiers, they listened without question. At first, Lyra kept her distance from Darren. She believed humans were too emotional and unpredictable. She had read reports that humans sometimes acted on feelings instead of orders. In Varian culture, emotion was seen as weakness. To her, Darren was a risk she had to manage. Darren, on the other hand, admired Lyra's focus and calm strength. He did not understand how someone could be so controlled, but he respected her discipline. When they began working together, he noticed how careful she was about every detail. She never raised her voice, never showed fear, and never complained. She was a perfect soldier, but there was a sadness in her eyes that he could not ignore. Their first mission together came sooner than expected. A mining colony on the edge of the Varian system had gone silent. The last message said that unknown ships were approaching. Lyra's unit was sent to investigate, with Darren and his human team joining the operation. As their transport ship left the capital city, Darren looked through the window at the shining towers below. He had seen many planets, but this one felt different. It was beautiful, yes, but also cold, as if emotion itself had been locked away. He wondered if the people here ever laughed or cried. When they reached the colony, they found smoke rising from the surface. The Krell had attacked. The mining station was half destroyed, and survivors were hiding in the tunnels. Lyra ordered her forces to land and secure the area. Darren's squad took point, moving carefully through the ruins. The Krell were still there, tall, scaled creatures with heavy armor and energy rifles. The battle began fast. Darren's team fought with courage, covering the civilians while Lyra coordinated air support. The sound of plasma fire filled the air. Explosions shook the ground. Amid the chaos, one of the Varian pilots was hit, and her ship crashed near the colony gates. Lyra ran toward the wreck despite the danger. Darren saw her and followed. Together they pulled the pilot from the burning cockpit. A Krell sniper fired from a rooftop. Without thinking, Darren threw himself in front of Lyra and took the shot on his armor plate. The blast knocked him down, but his armor held. Lyra turned and neutralized the enemy with perfect precision. When the last of the Krell retreated, the colony was safe again. Lyra looked at Darren as he sat on the ground, smoke rising from his armor. He smiled weakly and said, "Guess that was close." She stared for a moment, then nodded. "You are reckless," she said, "but brave." From that moment, something began to change. In the days that followed, Lyra and Darren worked side by side to rebuild the colony's defenses. The survivors thanked them both, calling them heroes. Lyra tried to ignore the warmth she felt when Darren smiled, but it grew stronger every time they spoke. He would tell her stories of Earth, of blue oceans, green forests, and people who fought not for orders but for love and family. To Lyra, these words sounded strange yet powerful. Her people did not speak of love in war. They saw it as distraction, but Darren made it sound like strength. At night, when the camp grew quiet, Lyra often stood by the edge of the landing field, watching the stars. Darren would walk over and stand beside her. He never said much, only shared the silence. Slowly, they began to trust each other in a way neither expected. One evening, a storm rolled in. The Varian night sky turned violet with flashes of lightning. The soldiers took shelter, but the communication tower was struck. The system that linked them to orbit stopped working. Lyra ordered a repair team, and Darren insisted on helping. Together, they climbed the narrow tower in the rain. When they reached the top, the wind howled around them. Lyra worked on the control panel, her silver hair whipping in the air. Darren held the safety cable and shone a light for her. She slipped once and he caught her arm. For a moment they were very close. The light from the tower reflected in her eyes. Neither spoke. Then she pulled her arm free and said softly, "Thank you, human." "Name's Darren," he said, smiling. "You can call me that." She hesitated, then replied, "Very well, Darren." By the time they finished repairs, the storm had passed. The stars returned, bright and endless. They stood for a while looking at them. Lyra said, "In my world, we are taught that emotion clouds judgment, but I have seen that your kind uses emotion as strength." Darren answered, "Sometimes it hurts, but it also keeps us human. It reminds us what we fight for." That night, Lyra wrote a report to the Varian Council. She described the mission, the damage, and the bravery of the human soldiers, but she did not mention the moment on the tower or the feeling that stayed with her. Weeks later, new orders arrived. The Krell were gathering again near the border. The Alliance prepared for a larger attack. Lyra was promoted to lead the defense of 3 colonies, and Darren's team was assigned to her command permanently. Many Varian officers questioned this choice. They said humans were unpredictable, but Lyra defended them. She said that their passion made them powerful allies. This surprised everyone, even Darren. Their bond grew stronger with each mission. When they trained, they moved in perfect rhythm. When danger came, they protected each other without thought. Other soldiers began to notice, whispering that the human and the Varian commander were more than comrades, but both of them knew the truth. Varian law did not allow such bonds. Relationships between species were forbidden, not out of hate but out of fear. The Varians believed that emotions from other species could break their ancient balance. Lyra knew this rule better than anyone. She had sworn to obey it. Yet every time Darren looked at her, she felt that oath grow weaker. One night, as they prepared for another battle, Lyra stood in the control room staring at the holomap. Darren entered quietly. She turned and said, "We are outnumbered. The Krell will strike at dawn." He answered, "Then we fight at dawn." She looked at him, her voice softer now. "You should fear death more than that." Darren smiled. "I don't fight because I want to die. I fight because someone has to live." Her heart stirred at those words, though she tried to hide it. When the alarm sounded and the soldiers rushed to their stations, she watched him go and felt something she had never felt before. Fear not for herself, but for him. The war was only beginning, but already both knew their lives were changing. The galaxy was vast, the laws were strict, and their worlds were far apart. Yet something had started between them that no rule could erase. And though neither would admit it aloud, both Darren and Lyra felt that their fates were now tied together, not by orders or duty, but by something deeper that neither fully understood. Weeks turned into months after the battle at the mining colony. The human and Varian forces worked together across several border worlds, pushing back the Krell attacks. Darren and Lyra became known throughout the Alliance as a perfect team. Wherever they went, victories followed. The soldiers said they fought like one mind and one heart. But inside the calm rhythm of daily war, something deeper began to grow. Lyra felt it every time Darren spoke to her without fear, every time he smiled even when the situation was grim. Humans, she noticed, carried a strange light in their hearts. They were fragile compared to most alien species, yet they never gave up. That stubborn courage fascinated her. The new outpost on the frozen planet Nera was cold and lonely. It was far from any major world, built to monitor enemy movement. The soldiers lived in small shelters buried under the ice. Outside, the storms never stopped. The wind howled across the frozen plains like a ghost. Inside the base, the silence was heavy. Darren and his team had been assigned there for 3 months. Lyra was in command of the outpost. Their mission was to defend the radar stations that warned nearby colonies of any Krell invasion. The base had limited supplies, so the soldiers had to fix broken machines, hunt for resources, and survive in the harsh climate. During long nights in the command room, Lyra and Darren worked side by side. They studied the maps, watched the scanners, and checked the sky for movement. Sometimes they spoke about war, but more often they spoke about life. Darren told her about Earth, about the cities, the oceans, and the way people celebrated small things. He described children playing in the rain, music echoing in the streets, and families sharing food after long days of work. Lyra listened carefully. Her people did not live like that. On Vera, emotions were private. Joy was seen as wasteful, sadness as weakness. When she heard Darren's stories, she felt as if she had been blind her whole life. Humans were imperfect, yet their imperfection was what made them beautiful. One evening, when the snow outside glowed under the pale light of the moons, Lyra asked, "Why do your people risk so much for others? Even strangers?" Darren looked at her quietly before answering. "Because we know what it means to lose. Every human carries history in their heart. We help others so they don't have to feel that pain." His words stayed with her long after he left the room. Days later, an alarm broke the silence. The Krell were attacking again. Their ships had appeared on the radar, moving fast toward the outpost. The soldiers prepared quickly, setting up defenses on the outer ridges. Lyra commanded the troops, her voice calm as always, but her mind was racing. The Krell came with fire and thunder. The snow burned under plasma blasts. Darren's squad fought on the front line, holding the main entrance. The enemy was stronger this time. Lyra saw Darren's position from the command tower. When the communication line went silent, she felt fear rise in her chest. Ignoring the safety protocols, she left the tower and ran into the storm. Her guards called after her, but she did not stop. She found Darren's team pinned behind a broken wall, surrounded. Without hesitation, she joined the fight. Her rifle flashed with blue light as she covered his flank. Together, they pushed the enemy back. At one point, a Krell grenade landed near them. Darren threw himself over Lyra, shielding her with his armor. The explosion threw them both to the ground. When the smoke cleared, Lyra looked at him. His armor was cracked, his face pale from exhaustion, but he smiled anyway. "Still standing," he said. That moment burned into her memory. When the battle ended, the Krell retreated, leaving the snow stained with light. The humans and Varians cheered their survival. Lyra walked back to the command center beside Darren. She wanted to thank him, but the words felt too small. Instead, she simply said, "You disobeyed orders by leaving your position." Darren laughed softly. "And you disobeyed yours by coming to save me." For the first time in her life, Lyra smiled without hiding it. Later, when the soldiers rested, she sat alone in her chamber. Her thoughts were heavy. She had grown up believing that love was a weakness. Yet she could not stop thinking about the human who risked his life for her again and again. Her heart felt light when she saw him, and heavy when she thought of losing him. She tried to remind herself that such feelings were forbidden. The Varian Council's laws were clear. Relationships between species were seen as threats to cultural harmony. A commander who broke that rule could lose her rank or worse, but every law felt meaningless when she looked into his eyes. The next day, she called Darren to the observation deck. The room had a wide glass wall that showed the endless white landscape. She stood there in silence until he arrived. "Something is troubling you," Darren said. She turned to face him. "There are things that should not happen between us," she replied. "You are human and I am Varian. Our worlds are different. Our laws are different. If the council learns that I have grown too close to you, I could be exiled." Darren looked out at the frozen horizon. "Do you believe I would ever hurt you or your people?" "No," she said quickly. "That is not the reason. It is about what others will say. They will think emotion clouds duty." "Then let them think," he said quietly. "I fight beside you because I trust you. That is not emotion. That is loyalty." Lyra felt something inside her shift. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust her own heart, but fear held her back. She turned away. "We must keep our focus on the mission," she said. "That is all that matters." But Darren could see the conflict in her eyes. Days passed. The outpost repaired its defenses. Communication with the Alliance fleet was restored. Supplies arrived, bringing fresh food and equipment. Yet peace felt uneasy. Lyra and Darren spoke less often, though both thought about each other constantly. One evening, a small Varian scout ship landed near the base. A messenger from the council had come with strict orders. Lyra was to report to the capital after the next battle for review of her conduct. Someone had reported that she had broken protocol and acted under human influence. She guessed that one of her officers had sent the report. Darren saw her face after she read the message. "Bad news?" he asked. She nodded. "The council wants to question me. They believe I have allowed emotion to guide my decisions." "Because you saved me," he said quietly. "Because I saved a human." She corrected. "They will not see the difference." That night she could not sleep. She walked outside under the cold stars, the wind brushing against her skin. Darren followed her silently. When she noticed him, she did not tell him to leave. They stood together in the snow. "You know," Darren said after a while, "back on Earth people used to say that the heart does not follow orders. Maybe your council should try listening to that." Lyra smiled faintly. "You speak as if emotion can change the universe." "It already has," he said. "We are standing here because people once believed in something more than rules." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt her resolve begin to break. Before either of them could say another word, an alarm sounded again. The Krell had returned, larger in number this time. Both ran toward the base, ready to fight once more. The second battle of Nera was fierce. The enemy struck from the skies and the tunnels below. Explosions shook the ice fields. Darren led the ground troops while Lyra commanded the defense from above. Their coordination was flawless. When the last Krell ship fell from the sky, the soldiers shouted in victory. But the cost was high. Many were injured and the base was half destroyed. As they stood among the wreckage, Lyra received another message from the council. Her orders were clear. She would be removed from command and recalled to Vera for questioning. She looked at Darren. His armor was cracked, his hands covered in frost, but his eyes were steady. "I am being taken away," she said. "The council believes I have become too close to you. They will send me far from this war." Darren's voice was calm but heavy. "You saved me. You saved everyone here. If they cannot see that, then they are blind." She took a slow breath. "There are things I cannot change, Darren. Our laws are old. They will not allow what they do not understand." He wanted to speak, but she stopped him with a gentle motion of her hand. "Do not say anything more. Please." As the transport ship descended to take her away, Lyra turned one last time to look at him. The words came quietly, filled with pain and honesty. "Sorry, human, we can't marry each other." Then she stepped into the light and was gone. Months passed after Lyra's departure from the frozen world of Nera. The war with the Krell Dominion grew worse. Their fleet spread through the border systems like a storm. Outposts fell one after another and the Alliance struggled to hold the line. Darren continued to fight, though the fire in his heart dimmed. He led his human squad through every battle, always placing himself at the front. His courage inspired many, yet those who knew him saw the quiet pain behind his eyes. He never spoke of Lyra, but her absence hung around him like a shadow. The humans had earned respect across the Alliance. They were fewer in number, yet they stood firm where others retreated. The Varian Council could no longer ignore their strength. Still, for Darren, victory felt hollow. Every time he looked at the stars, he wondered where Lyra was. On the planet Vera, Lyra faced her own trial. The Council questioned her actions during the defense of Nera. They said she had acted with human influence and risked Varian lives. She stood before the tall crystal hall, surrounded by silent judges with silver eyes. "I saved lives," she said calmly. "Human or Varian, they were soldiers of the Alliance." One of the elders replied, "You let emotion guide you." "The law forbids personal attachment between species. It weakens judgment." "Then the law is blind," Lyra answered. "It does not see what makes us strong together." Her words caused whispers in the chamber. The council found her guilty of disobedience but stopped short of full exile. They sent her to the Northern Fleet, far from the human units, hoping time would erase what she felt. But time only made her heart heavier. Far across space, Darren was assigned to lead a new joint command on a different front. His mission was to defend the system surrounding Vera itself, the heart of the Alliance. The Krell had gathered a massive armada, and the final battle was near. When Darren arrived, he learned that the Varian Northern Fleet, under Commander Lyra, was expected to join the defense. For a long moment he stood in silence, unsure if he wanted to see her again or feared it. The day came when their fleets gathered around Vera. Hundreds of ships filled the sky above the shining planet. The atmosphere glowed with shields and engines. The Alliance prepared for the largest battle in its history. In the command hall, Darren stood among the generals. The air was thick with tension. On the screen, the Krell Armada appeared, stretching across the dark horizon. The enemy ships moved like a wall of fire. Lyra's fleet arrived moments later. Her voice came through the communication channel, calm as always. "This is Commander Lyra of the Northern Fleet. We stand ready." Hearing her voice after so long made Darren's heart tighten. He wanted to speak, but duty came first. The battle plan was simple yet deadly. The human ground forces would defend the planetary shields while the Varian fleets held the skies. The first wave of Krell ships struck hard. Explosions lit up the space around Vera. Fighters weaved through plasma storms, and the ground trembled as ships fell from orbit. Darren's squad moved through the burning city streets, helping civilians reach the shelters. Above, Lyra led her fleet through chaos. She commanded with perfect control, her voice guiding every ship. But when the enemy broke through the second defense line and began targeting the human positions, her calm broke. She heard the distress call from Darren's unit. The ground forces were trapped near the river bridge, surrounded and losing power. Her second officer warned, "Commander, our orders are to protect the orbital shields. We cannot leave formation." Lyra's voice turned firm. "If the ground falls, the shield means nothing." She ordered her fleet to descend lower into the atmosphere, breaking direct orders from the Council again. Her ships rained fire on the enemy positions, clearing the way for Darren's unit to retreat. The Krell were forced back toward the hills. On the ground, Darren looked up and saw her ships blazing through the clouds. His heart filled with both pride and fear. He knew what it meant for her to act like this. She was risking her command, her future, and maybe her life. When the fighting slowed, Darren and his team reached the command base near the city center. He contacted the fleet channel. "Commander Lyra, this is Captain Darren. You saved us again." There was a brief silence, then her voice came softly through the speaker. "You never stopped fighting. I could not either." For a moment, the noise of war faded. Only their voices filled the room. Then another explosion rocked the base. The Krell had launched a new type of weapon, breaking through the lower shield. The command building shook. Darren's squad moved to defend the power core that kept the shield running. Lyra's fleet fought desperately in the skies to stop enemy reinforcements. Hours passed like minutes. The battle became one long storm of fire and courage. Many ships were destroyed, but the line held. Humanity and Vera fought as one, bound not by law but by trust. At last, the enemy flagship appeared. It was larger than any ship they had seen before, shaped like a dark blade. It opened fire on the planetary shield, tearing through layers of defense. Lyra knew that if it was not destroyed, Vera would fall. She called Darren on a private channel. "There is only one chance," she said. "If we overload the central reactor, the explosion might take out the flagship." Darren understood what she meant. "That would destroy your ship." "I know," she said quietly. "But if I do not, the planet will die." He clenched his fists. "No, there has to be another way." "There is not," she said. "You once told me that fighting for others is what makes us human. Maybe it is what makes us alive, no matter the species." Before he could answer, her signal cut off. Her ship turned toward the enemy flagship, engines burning brighter than ever. The crew tried to stop her, but she locked the controls. Her voice came through every channel, steady and clear. "For the Alliance. For Vera. For what we have learned together." The explosion lit the sky like a second sun. The enemy flagship vanished in the blaze. The shockwave swept across the battlefield, scattering the Krell fleet. The humans and Varians watched in silence as the darkness cleared. The war was over. The Krell retreated beyond the border, defeated at last. On the surface, Darren stood among the ruins, looking up at the sky where the light still glowed. His armor was cracked, his hands trembling. He could not feel the victory. Only loss filled his heart. The communication channels were silent. No signal came from Lyra's ship. The command reported that nothing survived the explosion. For days after the battle, Darren helped rebuild the city. People called him a hero, but he felt empty. When he closed his eyes, he saw her face. He remembered her words on Nera and the promise in her eyes. Then one evening, as the sun set behind the silver towers, a small signal appeared on his communicator. It was weak, almost lost in static, but the voice was hers. "Darren, if you hear this, know that I survived. The explosion threw my ship far from the battlefield. I am alive, but I cannot return. The Council will not allow it. They will call me a traitor. But I am not sorry. You showed me what it means to feel and to fight with heart. Tell your people that the Varians will remember." The signal ended. Darren stood in silence, the message still echoing in his ears. The stars above him seemed brighter that night. He knew she was out there somewhere, still watching, still fighting for what was right. He knelt on the ground, not from weakness but from respect. For her, for all they had lost and for all they had learned. The galaxy had changed that day. The Varians had seen what humanity could teach, that love and courage were not flaws but strengths. The story of the human warrior and the Varian commander spread across the Alliance. It became more than a tale of war. It became a lesson about unity, about hearts that could bridge worlds. And though Darren never saw Lyra again, he carried her words with him through every mission, every silent night beneath the stars. In his heart he believed that someday the laws would change. And when that day came, humanity and Vera would stand together not just as allies but as family. Months had passed since the great battle for Vera. The Krell Dominion had retreated and the Alliance worked to repair what the war had broken. Darren continued to serve, though the empty space left by Lyra's absence weighed heavily on his heart. Each mission, no matter how important, felt incomplete. The humans had proven themselves once more. Reports of Darren's bravery spread across the Alliance. He had become a symbol of hope and courage. Generals admired his tactical mind and willingness to risk everything for his squad. Yet none of that brought him comfort. He still thought of Lyra, imagining her far away, fighting alone, living in exile for the choices she had made. Meanwhile, Lyra's exile to the northern colonies was harsh and lonely. The planet Orion was a quiet mining world with red sands and narrow canyons. The northern fleet under her command was distant from the central Varian government, and she had few allies. Orders came from the Council in cold, formal messages, but she did not obey blindly. She spent hours each day training her crews, preparing them for potential Krell attacks. Her discipline was absolute and the soldiers respected her, yet she felt a deep loneliness. Every time she saw young soldiers learning to fight, she remembered Darren's laughter and courage. She remembered the way he had looked at her on Nera, the trust in his eyes, the hope that humans could teach something new to her people. In secret, Lyra began writing letters to Darren. The transmissions were hidden in encrypted codes that no one but he could access. She did not write often, only when she felt the need to share something important. She told him about the training, the planets she had seen, and the small victories her fleet achieved. Each letter was filled with hope, encouragement, and subtle warmth. Darren treasured each message. He read them over and over when the night was quiet. They reminded him that she was alive, that the bond they shared, though forbidden, still mattered. He often smiled at the small jokes she slipped into the messages, and sometimes he felt as though she were beside him, guiding him through the lonely months. The Alliance, however, faced a new challenge. The Krell Dominion, though weakened, had not disappeared. Scouts reported that their forces were regrouping near the border systems. Intelligence suggested they were planning a massive invasion. The Central Command called for a council of all available commanders to prepare for the final defense of the Alliance capital. Darren volunteered immediately. He requested to lead a unit on the front lines, knowing that his skills could save countless lives. The Varians initially questioned his assignment, citing the danger, but the human's reputation was undeniable. He was sent to the front without hesitation. Lyra, far on Orion, received news of the approaching Krell fleet. Though she was not allowed to join the central battle, she could not ignore the threat. Her fleet prepared, conducting patrols and securing colonies under her command. Every decision she made reflected the lessons she had learned from humans. Trust, courage, and the strength to act even when rules forbade it. As the invasion began, the Krell attacked with a force unlike anything the Alliance had faced before. Entire star systems trembled under their assault. Darren's fleet fought with precision, defending supply lines and protecting civilians. He moved like a shadow through the battlefield, appearing wherever the enemy threatened most. Despite the victories, Darren could not ignore the emptiness inside him. He thought constantly of Lyra, imagining her in distant systems carrying the weight of exile. He knew she was alive because of her letters, but he longed to see her face again, to stand beside her as they had on Nera and Vera. One evening, while monitoring the scanners, Darren noticed an anomaly. A ship had appeared, moving at impossible speed, evading every detection system. It carried the unique Varian signature he recognized immediately. His heart raced. Could it be? Could it truly be her? The ship landed near the command center, careful not to be seen by prying Krell scouts. Darren ran to the landing area, his mind struggling to believe. And there she was, Lyra, alive and unharmed, her eyes scanning the horizon for threats. "Commander Lyra," he whispered, unable to hide his joy. "Darren," she replied, her voice steady but filled with relief. "I could not ignore the threat. Your forces need help and I could not wait any longer." "Do you know what this means?" he asked. "You are risking everything. The Council will never forgive you if they find out." "I know," she said, "but we cannot let the Krell destroy everything we have built together. Not after all we have learned. Not after everything humans and Varians have fought for." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the burning horizon where Krell scouts approached. Then they turned together, ready to face the final battle. The fight that followed was brutal. The Krell had learned from previous defeats and attacked with strategy and speed. But the alliance, inspired by the courage of Darren and Lyra, held strong. The human squads moved like coordinated shadows, while the Varian fleet struck with precision. Darren and Lyra communicated without words, anticipating each other's actions, covering each flank, and saving countless lives. During a critical moment, the Krell launched a massive assault on the orbital defenses. Darren's squad was pinned and several human ships were damaged. Without hesitation, Lyra took her fleet into the thick of the battle, shielding the humans and coordinating counterattacks. Darren saw her in the chaos, moving through enemy fire, calm and determined. For a brief moment he felt the old fear rise, fear of losing her again, but he pushed it aside and fought with renewed strength. Together they turned the tide, scattering the Krell forces and saving the planetary shields. After the battle, the survivors gathered to repair damages. The citizens of the Alliance capital cheered the heroes who had risked everything. Darren and Lyra were celebrated, but neither sought attention. They shared a quiet moment in the observation deck, watching the stars return to calm. "We have done it again," Darren said quietly. "Yes," Lyra replied, her voice soft. "But it is only the beginning. The war is not over, and there are still laws that keep us apart." Darren looked at her, eyes filled with determination. "Then we will change them. One day they will see what we already know. That courage, loyalty, and love are not weaknesses. They are strength," Lyra smiled faintly. "You always speak as if the impossible can become real." "Sometimes the impossible is only a rule waiting to be rewritten," Darren said. For the first time, Lyra allowed herself to hope. The laws of her people were old and unyielding, but humans had taught her that change was possible. Together they could show the galaxy that different worlds, different hearts could stand as one. Days turned into weeks. Darren continued to lead missions with unmatched courage. Lyra, still in exile officially, found ways to support him and the Alliance secretly. Their bond grew stronger, though still forbidden. Each small victory against the Krell reminded them that their connection was not just personal, but symbolic of what the galaxy could become. United, brave, and compassionate. At night, Darren would look at the stars, imagining her watching from a distant world. He would remember the battles, the victories, and the quiet moments they had shared. And he would know that humanity had something no law could forbid: the power to inspire, to protect, and to love across worlds. The story of the human warrior and the Varian commander spread quietly through the Alliance, not through announcements or ceremonies, but in whispers of hope and courage. It became a lesson, not just in bravery, but in the strength of the heart. And somewhere in the northern colonies, Lyra watched the stars with the same thought, knowing that though the Council had tried to separate them, nothing could break the bond forged in battle and respect. They were apart physically, yet together in purpose, in courage, and in the quiet truth that their hearts had chosen each other. The war was far from over, but for the first time, both of them understood that no law, no distance, and no enemy could diminish the power of unity, trust, and love. And that understanding gave them both the strength to continue fighting, to continue leading, and to continue believing that someday the galaxy itself would recognize the truth they already knew. The galaxy had been at war for years, and the Krell Dominion's threat had grown stronger. Entire systems trembled under the shadow of their fleets, yet the Alliance had endured. Stories of courage spread like fire among the stars. One story in particular traveled quietly from fleet to fleet. The tale of the human warrior Darren and the Varian commander Lyra. Darren stood on the command bridge of the Alliance capital's flagship, watching the stars swirl past. The Krell had gathered their forces in unprecedented numbers. Every communication channel was alive with reports of enemy movement. Yet in his heart, Darren felt a strange calm. He knew that victory would not come from weapons alone. It would come from courage, unity, and the unshakable belief that humans and aliens together could stand against any threat. Suddenly, a familiar signal blinked on his communicator. He recognized it immediately, Lyra's encrypted code. His heart leaped. He activated the channel. "Darren," her voice came, steady yet warm. "I am joining you. I cannot stay apart when the Alliance faces its greatest danger. The Council cannot stop me this time." "Are you certain?" he asked. "They will call you a traitor." "I am certain," she replied. "I will not let fear or law dictate what is right. Not when lives are at stake." Darren nodded, though she could not see him. "Then let us end this together." The final battle began before the fleet fully assembled. The Krell flagship led the charge, its massive form blotting out the stars. Thousands of enemy fighters followed, moving in perfect formation. It was the largest invasion the galaxy had ever seen. Darren and his human squadrons formed a defensive line near the planet's orbit. Varian fleets moved with precision, coordinating attacks and covering weak points. And then Lyra appeared, descending from hyperspace with her northern fleet. Every ship she commanded reflected her discipline, her courage, and her willingness to fight for what was right. The two commanders exchanged one brief signal, a silent understanding. There were no words needed. They had fought together before, trusted each other with their lives, and now faced the greatest challenge yet. The battle erupted in brilliant light. Plasma beams cut across space. Explosions lit the void like miniature suns. Fighters weaved between massive ships, dodging fire and returning attacks. Darren led his humans with skill and determination, while Lyra guided her fleet with flawless precision. Hours passed like minutes. Each move was critical, every decision life or death. At one point, Darren's flagship was surrounded by Krell destroyers. Their shields flickered under heavy fire. He fought with calm determination, issuing orders, maneuvering, and protecting his squad. Then Lyra's fleet appeared above the enemy formation. Her ships sliced through the Krell lines, creating openings for Darren to escape. The humans cheered as their commander led the charge, and the Krell were forced back. Yet the true challenge remained. The Krell flagship, larger and more powerful than any ship in the Alliance, moved toward the planet's capital. It carried weapons capable of destroying entire cities in a single strike. Darren knew that if it was not stopped, the Alliance would lose everything. "Lyra," he said over the channel, "we must take it down together. There is no other way." "I know," she replied. "We will end this, not just for our people, but for all who have suffered under the Krell. We fight as one." Their plan was daring. Darren would draw the flagship's fire, maneuvering through its defenses while Lyra led a precise strike from above. Timing would be everything. One mistake and they could both be destroyed. The battle began. Darren's ship weaved through enemy fire, shields flaring under the hits. He coordinated his squad, drawing the Krell flagship's attention and protecting the planet below. Lyra's fleet moved silently in formation, each ship striking at weak points exposed by Darren's maneuvers. Minutes felt like hours. The flagship fired with relentless force. Darren's squad suffered losses, but he never faltered. Every decision was precise, every action calculated. He could feel Lyra's presence guiding him, her skill and courage strengthening his own. Finally, the moment came. Lyra identified the core of the Krell flagship, its weakest point. She communicated silently with Darren, signaling the attack. He moved into position, drawing the flagship's weapons directly at himself while Lyra's fleet prepared to strike. "Now," she whispered through the channel. Her ships fired in perfect harmony. Energy beams converged on the core, striking with overwhelming force. The Krell flagship shuddered, then erupted in a massive explosion that lit the void for thousands of kilometers. Its destruction sent shockwaves through the enemy fleet, scattering ships and breaking their formation. The Krell began to retreat. The Alliance had won. Darren and Lyra watched as the remnants of the enemy fled across the stars. Exhaustion hit them, but the relief was overwhelming. They had survived and the galaxy was safe, for now. After the battle, both commanders returned to the Alliance capital. The citizens and soldiers welcomed them as heroes. Darren's squad cheered and the Varian fleet saluted. Lyra stood beside him, their eyes meeting with quiet understanding. The Council of Vera convened after the battle. They could no longer deny the truth. Humans and Varians had fought together, saved countless lives, and demonstrated qualities that transcended laws and traditions. They could ignore bravery and loyalty no longer. Lyra stood before the council. The human warrior Darren and I have fought together, not for glory but for the lives of everyone in the Alliance. He has shown courage, loyalty, and strength beyond what laws can measure. It is time to recognize that unity and that emotion can be a source of power, not weakness. The council deliberated. Whispers ran through the room. For the first time, emotion was acknowledged openly. Laws were reconsidered. They could not erase what had already been proven. Humans had something unique, something that had changed the course of the war. When the deliberation ended, the head of the council spoke. We have seen that humanity's courage and heart are qualities that strengthen our alliance. Laws will change. What once was forbidden will now be honored. The bond between Darren and Commander Lyra is a symbol of what can be achieved when species stand together. Darren and Lyra looked at each other, their hearts full. No words were needed. They had fought together, survived together, and changed the galaxy together. Later, as the sun rose over the Alliance capital, the two of them stood on the observation deck. The city sparkled below, rebuilt and thriving. Ships moved through the skies, carrying supplies and new settlers. The galaxy was alive with hope and possibility. Lyra turned to Darren. The council has changed their laws. What was forbidden is now allowed. Darren knelt before her not out of weakness but as a gesture of respect and love. Then perhaps our hearts were always meant to find each other, he said. She smiled, silver eyes glowing in the morning light. Perhaps they were. And perhaps humanity has taught the galaxy that courage and love are not weaknesses, but the greatest strength of all. They stood together, watching the stars, knowing that the journey was far from over. The Krell might return and new threats would rise, but they were ready. Together they had proven that no law, no distance, and no enemy could break the bond forged in trust, courage, and the unyielding power of the human heart. For Darren and Lyra, the story was no longer about war or law. It was about hope, unity, and the promise that even in the vastness of the stars, hearts could meet, connect, and change the course of history. And as they looked toward the future, the galaxy seemed brighter than ever. Humanity had not only survived, but it had inspired, led, and taught the stars themselves what it meant to fight with heart. The human warrior and the Varian commander would forever stand as a symbol, a reminder to all that courage, loyalty, and love were the forces that shaped the galaxy, and that even the oldest laws could bend before the strength of what was right. Above them, the stars shone like witnesses to a new era, an era in which humanity was no longer just a part of the galaxy, but a beacon of hope, courage, and the undeniable proof that hearts could change worlds. And together, Darren and Lyra faced that era, ready to write the next chapter, side by side across the stars.